So good morning, I'm Clarity. I'm about to start our interview with Bharati, Karen Busch from the Portland community. She's one of the co-founders of the Living Wisdom School in Portland, along with Usha. And she's been teaching around 26 years, maybe plus now. And she is just a wonderful and delightful person to be around. I've known her for quite a few years. She was also a mentor of mine. And she just has a wealth of knowledge to share with us. And I'm excited to start our interview today. So let's jump in.
Yes, those were fun days. You know,
Yeah.
we had nothing. I mean, we didn't have any money to start with or anything. And actually, Helen and John, who were the instigators really, for Tonya, you remember Tonya Gorman?
Yeah.
She was going into first grade. So they really wanted that. And they had sold their house in Cornelius, moved into the community in Portland, and then lent the school like $1,000 or $2,000 or something to make whatever changes we needed to make. And they said, you know, if you can pay us back at some point, great. But if not, oh, well, it was worth it, you know. So, but most of the things, aside from new carpeting, since there was white carpet in there, we thought, yeah, not for little ones. And some lighting and stuff. We painted, and we made tables out of old closet doors and so forth, you know, and we got little plastic chairs from whatever, Home Depot or something, you know. And then Lynn Shirley and I went to yard sales all summer long, and we'd buy glue and scissors and construction paper and all that stuff for, you know, a quarter or whatever, really cheap. And we were not too far from the library, so I just go to the library every week and check out 30 books or something, and that's what we did.
Wow. So what was the room that you were starting it? It was in the Ananda Center?
Yes, it was, you know, I don't know if have you been in the temple there? There, you know, there's that side room. Originally it had been a mortuary, so this was like a side viewing room or something. And so they just kind of closed that off. There'd been big windows so you could sit in there and look out into the main sanctuary, but we just covered those and you know, put in different carpet and so forth. And that was our first classroom for 2 years.
Wow.
And eventually we took a couple other rooms there. And then we got Angel House, which was on the other side of the block, but the backyards adjoined. So, and we still have that to use. And we had a couple classrooms over there and the office eventually.
So you started with the first grade and then you just went from there? You just kept expanding, or how did that work?
We started with kindergarten, first and second. And there were 7 kids when we started. We didn't know, 2 of them just came the last couple days before school started. We didn't know what was going to happen. And I had been teaching for Portland Public Schools, special ed teacher, and I had my contract and I had to either sign it or not sign it, you know. And at that point, we still didn't know whether we had enough students to make it work. And finally I said, well, I'm just gonna go for it and, you know, refuse my contract. And if the school doesn't work out, I'll figure it out, you know. Fortunately, wow. I just had myself to worry about. So I thought, and Helen and John said, well, we'll make sure you get food at dinner at least once a week, you know. So anyway, that's what we did.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then we just added a grade until we got up to 6th grade, I think. And then we went K through 6 for a while. And then eventually we added on preschool. And initially, Usha wasn't very thrilled with that idea because she was thinking of the California regulations, and it's a big production to have a preschool. But in Oregon, if it's not a daycare, it's a preschool, hardly anything that you have to do special. I mean, you have to have a small toilet, I think, and think that the kids can reach, but really it's not. It's way, way easier than she was anticipating. So we did that. And at a couple different times through the years, we went up through 8th grade.
Wow. And
so
it was just the three of you teachers, or?
Well, initially I was the teacher. Usha was doing half-time administrative stuff. And so I was teaching the classes, and then Helen kindly volunteered 3 mornings a week to help with the kindergartners. I had 3 kindergartners, 2 first graders, and 2 second graders.
Wow.
And the other one you might know, Claire Potter. Do you know her?
Yep.
She was in kindergarten that first year.
Wow, amazing.
So, yeah. So, and then the next year, Helen came on as our kindergarten teacher, and she had just kindergarten. And then I had first, second, third, and I had those 3 grades for a number of years.
So it all
I think maybe, I was going to say, I think it was maybe the 3rd or 4th year, David Eby came and taught for a couple of years with us.
Oh, wow.
And then when he left and went to California, to the village, we've had a couple other teachers in there too along the way. And anyway, it worked out.
Sounds very organic, the process of it all happening. It wasn't like you had a business plan and it was all mapped out. It was just sort of, just providing what was needed. Yeah.
Yeah, for who we had. And actually, Helen had gone to a wedding the weekend before school was starting and met somebody and who said, "Oh, that sounds perfect for my daughter who's going into first grade. Sign me up."
Wow.
So it was just, a lot of it happened like that. Yeah.
Was it hard to convince the parents, or were all the parents sort of wanting this type of education in the first place?
Well, I think from that first group, people wanted it.
Yeah.
As when they heard about it, knew something about it, then they were eager for it. We've had times through the years when parents were not so attuned. They'd want their kids to come there, but then they wanted it to be what they wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out because we felt like we knew what our mission was. And that's the kind of school we were going to have. And if that worked for them, terrific. And if it didn't, then they needed to find what would work for them.
How important do you think that is, what you just said about you as teachers? You knew what your mission was, or you knew what it was that you wanted to do. How important is that for teachers who want to start, in a school with the Education for Life principles?
I think it's critical. Maybe a few years in, we ended up getting a bunch of kids from a school that closed, and it had been started actually by a group of parents who hired a teacher, and they all knew what they didn't want for their kids. What they didn't know is what they did want, really. And so as long as that one teacher was there, it kind of worked out pretty well. But then when they needed to have a different teacher, there wasn't a real framework there. It was based around the teacher's personality. But having guiding principles makes a huge difference. Then you can survive the transition from teacher to teacher, from student to student, administrator to administrator, because you've got a framework.
And where were you guys really drawing those principles from? Because I remember in your questionnaire, you did talk about the book, but you mentioned Swami even said that the book was just sort of an outline and it was up to you to expand upon his ideas. Could you, where were you guys drawing from?
I think basically from the book initially. I mean, he wrote it in '86, so we didn't start the school till '97. And he'd actually, I think '97 or '98, he revised it quite a bit. And, but, Usha had been teaching at the village, and I had taken a workshop there, which didn't help me all that much, because actually I was used to teaching either older kids like high school age kids or special ed kids, of all ages, but whatever. And at the beginning, after school started our very first year, I was kind of freaking out and going, I don't know if I know what it means to be an Education for Life teacher. I'm grasping at straws here. I mean, I knew some of the things like the stages and the tools and specific gravity, but I hadn't really had that much experience with them. And fortunately, Usha, being the wise person that she can be, suggested I go down to the village and spend a day or two with Narani, which I did. And it just really helped me relax. I realized it's like, okay, I'm not going to be the same as Narani. And who else? Somebody else I visited several classrooms, but I thought, I'm not going to be like they are, but I can be an Education for Life teacher the way I am. And so that was just so helpful. And then later on, Usha was always interested in teacher education and so forth. So for a number of years, we would have in-person workshops in Portland, sometimes over several weekends, and sometimes people from Seattle or California came or whatever, wherever. But helping to organize that and put it together and teach some of the classes. Anytime you teach something, you realize what you know and what you don't about it. And having to find ways to explain it to people really strengthened my understanding of it all. And then, of course, just being in the classroom, I mean, if you're going to do it, you have to do it, and you learn because the kids are your teachers. You're their teacher, they're your teachers.
How important do you find that, like, let's say, for example, for new teachers who want to get into EFL, how important is it for them to either spend some time around other EFL teachers or to touch in with them, maybe even to have maybe join a program or an online offering or something where they can sort of have some exposure to other EFL teachers? Do you feel like that would be an important thing for them, or?
Very. And it makes a difference if they're people who've already taught for a while, because they've had, your first year of teaching always is like, I don't know, jumping into boiling water or something. You just swim as fast as you can and try not to scream, but no. And it's wonderful at the same time. I mean, it totally is, but it's very intense. And if teachers have kind of been through that phase, but they want a better understanding, more tools, a different way of looking at education, it's one thing. If it's somebody who's never taught at all, it's just a different situation. You want to give them all the Education for Life tools that you can. And you also know that some kind of, preferably an internship would be the best. I know they do that in Palo Alto, and I think that's kind of the ideal, where it's magnetism too. If you're around several, preferably Education for Life teachers, then you get a sense of what's Education for Life and what's this personality, So and having somebody to talk to, I think that, we taught later for a number of years online classes.
Yeah.
And that was good, I think. I mean, it was what we could do for people who were too far away to come. And at the same time, it wasn't, I think, as powerful as being able to be there. I think for people who actually, we always had homework that involved trying things with their students or children or whoever it was. If they really did that and then used that as a self-educating tool, that was a big help to them. Not everybody did, of course. All the same, I just felt like it wasn't, well, for me at least, I'm much more of a personal sort of learner. If I can watch somebody do it, if I can feel what they're, and then if they can give me little explanations of why they did this in this situations, because sometimes you're just watching somebody and they respond one way with one student, and then it'll seem like very similar circumstances with another student, and they'll respond very differently. And if they can just say, well, I did that because da 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 da, then you go, oh, okay, I get that.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Just remembering that idea of mentorship and how important that is. And Aria Vaughn was mentioning to me just recently that during the EFL conference, this idea came up of having some of the older, more established EFL teachers maybe do like an online mentoring program with some of the newer teachers who are going to start studying the philosophy and signing up for the database. And there could be some kind of mentorship program that happens there. I think that would just be amazing.
Yeah, it would be very helpful, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear that you think that's important. Maybe you could be one of the mentors.
Perhaps. Well, actually, we've got at the Portland School this fall, we've got Melissa Hart, who's been teaching with us for, I don't know, a number of years, and she's going to teach the kindergarten class. But our preschool teacher is somebody new, and the kindergarten assistant is somebody new. So they both know essentially nothing about Ed for Life, although they seem, one thing we always look for in teachers, if we can't get somebody who's, you know, a trained EFL teacher, which pretty much we never can, so, but we always look for somebody at least who has some kind of spiritual practice. It doesn't have to be ours, but some kind, because if you don't have that, it makes it hard to, well, everything about life is harder, I think, but yeah.
True.
But it just helps you understand the principles, I think, a little more easily, especially like working with energy and so forth. If you have your own experience of higher and lower energy and changing energy and so forth.
That's a really good point. So I guess working with the EFL techniques, you really need to have that concept of energy, because the tools, sorry, I'm not familiar. Is it the specific gravity and tools of maturity?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the specific gravity, you're looking at what is the person, it's looking at motivation is one thing, but you're thinking of energy that's really heavy, or energy that's very light, or energy that's somewhere in the middle, and what motivates people at different levels. But it really is all about energy, because our consciousness, or, you know, you could look at it in a few different ways, but that's really, it's really important to understand and to be willing to work with things like, for myself, initially, when I learned about like the ego active, which is the vast, you know, proportion of people, including ourselves, are somewhere in that range. And ego active is like, what's in it for me? You know, we're not just acting out of a sense of rightness, you know, or we're not so heavy that we're not going to act at all. But for people who are in the kind of lower ego active, they need some kind of tangible reward to be motivated. And I had a hard time with that, because I always had the feeling that children should be good for nothing, you know, which is, of course, a play on words, you know, good for nothing, but also they should just do the right thing because it's the right thing, or because I told them to, you know,
Yeah.
which of course means it's the right thing. Anyway, so it was hard for me to accept that I would need to do that sometimes if it was important to me to motivate them to take certain actions. As you get into the higher ego active, the lighter ego active, it's more about helping them feel intrinsic rewards, or things that were not so tangible, like just having you say, wow, I noticed what you did, that was very helpful. That would be enough for them. But they would still need something like that. they wouldn't be acting solely from their own motivation. They wanted praise or whatever, but to hear that something was helpful. But that for me was easier to accept. But at some point, you're just thinking, and of course, most of our students were not super, in the lower levels, so heavy or so ego active, but some of them were, especially about some things. So that's just, I had to get over myself.
You shared a great story about having a child get motivated to do his handwriting assignment. Can you share that story?
Oh, yes. And actually, I remember it because, see, some of these things I would mention as I was chatting with Usha, and she would remember these stories because later, lots of times I wouldn't. I'm thinking, she goes, well, tell some stories about something. I'd be going, what? Anyway, so I had this one particular student, and they had a handwriting sheet of paper every day. They were supposed to trace some letters, write some words, whatever. And most of the kids would just do it, And one of them one day said, oh, would you write the letter on my back while I'm writing it on my paper? I think that'll help me feel how to make it. And so I did. And then pretty soon all the kids, write on me too, write on me too. And but this particular child he was hard to even get started doing it, but mainly he would, you'd kind of cajole him into doing a little bit, but then suddenly it was time for snack or lunch or something. He'd have a third of his paper done, maybe. And, I never felt like it was the right thing to say, sorry, you can't eat because you're not done yet. That didn't feel right. But I thought, okay, what can I do? What can I do? And he was very physically oriented. He was also very feeling oriented. And he always wanted me to write on his back. And, I'd just do it like I did with the other kids. I'd do the letter a couple times and then I'd move on. But it just seemed like he was always asking for more. So finally I thought, okay, well, how can I use this? Because it's something, if it's going to be a reward, it has to be a reward for them, not something that would be rewarding to me. And I thought, this is something he likes. Let's see what can happen. So we finally worked out this deal where he would do like all but the last line. If he had that all done and it was still like at least 3 to 5 minutes before whatever the break was, then I would come write. As long as he was writing on his last line, I would come right on his back the whole time. And that was enough to get him going. And, so many of these things, after a while, they don't care about the reward anymore. They just gotten moving on it. It was the inertia that was sometimes the hardest part to want to do it. Once they were more flowing with it, then it wasn't so much an issue. But that really appealed to both his physically, like the tactile sensation, but also the fact that, his teacher was writing on his back and all that. So
that's amazing that you tuned into him that way and just felt what it was that he needed to have that boost, basically. That's so
yeah. Well, that's one thing I love about some of the tools we have to work with because of the Education for Life principles, just that knowledge, this knowing about the stages of maturity, where they are in general, the whole group is, whether they're in the feeling years or the will years or, somewhere getting close to the border. So you can help provide the appropriate kind of activities for them, but also their individual tools. And some kids, it's really interesting, they really are very well balanced among all 4 tools. So then you just see, well, with this situation, what tool do they respond most to? Same with specific gravity. there's always the kind of specific gravity, the energy of the whole group, but within that, each child has their own levels, and it changes a lot with the task at hand. Like some kids are so eager to go out and run a relay, and others it's like dragging their feet. That would be me. I wanted to read instead, you know. I mean, I wouldn't mind reading outside, but I didn't want to get up and move or anything, you know. But everybody has their own things, and it's important to provide activities that appeal to every type of student. So whether they're more will-oriented or intellect-oriented or whatever, you need to be sure that you're offering them ways to learn that take advantage of whatever their strongest tool is. And also then to help them expand in their ability to use other tools as well. And that's one thing that I remember from my years in school is, especially in elementary school, junior high really too, but intellect was so emphasized that if you were good at intellectual things, then nobody cared if you were bad at other things, really.
Yeah.
You know, unless you were real extreme. But and I happen to be pretty good at those things, you know. I could get good grades and I could score well on tests and so forth. So nobody cared whether I had, you know, I quit taking PE the second I could. And I think I have fairly strong will as well, but certainly nobody ever cared about cultivating my feeling nature, you know, whether I was mean or kind or whatever, as long as, again, it wasn't too extreme. But so that's one thing I really, really appreciate about Education for Life, that sense that you want balance in life, and that the outer life and the inner life are both so important. You know, the breathing in, the breathing out, the inspiration, the expiration. That sounds fun.
So you mentioned about the importance of the EFL teachers having a spiritual practice. How important do you feel like that is to bring that into your classroom, or is it just something that you innately just have within yourself and it just sort of radiates out?
Well, I think both.
Yeah.
I think for me at least, and I can really only speak on that area from my own experience, but having that inner experience myself allowed me to help kids more when we'd run up against things like, I know that, you know, Nitai and Irene created, and maybe other people too, I'm sure, created those beautiful cards that deal with the different qualities and so forth. And of course, a lot of my teaching was before that ever was produced, but still the ideas were out there. But it seemed like day-to-day life in the classroom brings up opportunities to deal with all those things. You know, you can teach cooperation just by being there and learning to work together. You know, you don't have to have special kind of prepared lesson on cooperation. Today we're going to learn about being kind to each other. It's just, it comes up all the time because somebody isn't, or maybe they are, and you can just mention it in passing, you know, oh, look, you know, or, I noticed that you guys were working together on this and seemed to go really well. How did it feel to you? You know, that sort of thing. So actually, I've forgotten what the question was. Oh, I know. So for me, it was really both, but it was taking the things that I knew about and sharing that with the students. So for instance, in the early years, especially, we did a lot of chanting in the class. I had an auto harp, which is an instrument that, you know, anybody can play. You just hold the bar and strum. So I would learn a few chants that I could play on the auto harp, and we just sometimes, especially if we'd had been outside and tempers were running hot, something had happened, we'd come inside, everybody drink water, we dim the lights, and they had to lay so they couldn't touch anybody else, you know. And I mean, they wanted to, but any case, they did. And I would just play chords on my auto harp, and we'd all kind of cool off. And then if anybody still needed to process what happened, we could, but usually, often, nobody cared by that time. They were able to just let it go from their system. And we'd have in our class, what we called the calming corner. And you could choose to go there, or you could be encouraged by your teacher to go over there. And we had just different things, some pillows and so forth, nice pictures on the wall, some landscapes that were beautiful, but also baby animals. That was always a big hit with the kids in the feeling years and stuff. And just some different things, some little posters to remind them of some things they could do to calm themselves down, like just breathing or doing child's pose, or, you know, different things that might work for them. And again, it varied. Tonia's brother, Luca, he was in my class in his younger years, and he was a live wire. He's grown up to be a very mellow person, but back in those days, whoosh. But he, or maybe that was Aiden Rose's son, I can't remember. Anyway, we would have them do the letter S, just write it in their palm. And I was teaching them the Vimla alphabet and so forth, and just doing that because it's a letter that inspires calmness. So just the combination of focus and making that movement and being by themselves and out of the fray or whatever would often help. So there would be things like maybe silly putty sort of thing that you could squeeze and, you know, let go of some of the tension. And then whenever they were ready, they just come back and join the group.
Yeah, I'm just doing that right now. It does feel very, very soothing.
Yeah.
Very calming.
Like, oh, okay.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I heard from a couple other teachers that I did interviews with that you're sort of the handwriting person. They didn't say much.
Yeah, well, you know, it was interesting how things coincidentally happened. After we'd been having the school for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or something, I was noticing that every teacher, I mean, there were only maybe 4 of us or something, but everybody was doing handwriting a different way. And I was probably more focused on it because I've always liked handwriting. I used to do calligraphy and this and that. And so I was interested in that, but I also felt like we should all be doing the same style, because it just didn't make sense to me to go from one to the next, you know. And I said, so we had the staff meeting, and I'm making my plea, you know, going, I don't care what we do, let's just all do the same thing. And so we decided to look into different kinds and talk about it more later. And then that weekend I went down to the village because it was some event, you know, involved, I think maybe it was Swami's birthday or something. Anyway, there was the oratorio was happening one night, but one of my friends had gone to the boutique and had seen this book called Your Handwriting Can Change Your Life. And she was showing it to me and just like kind of, oh, here's this book I got, it looks interesting. And I sat down and started reading it, and I read through the entire oratorio.
Wow.
And I just went, oh man, why would you not want to then, they're gonna learn some form of writing, why would you not want to teach them a type of handwriting that supports their better qualities. And that system of handwriting was designed with that in mind. For each letter had a certain area that it applied to, and the specific form was designed to bring out that quality more. So I was just like, well, duh, here we are. So I took it back to the group and said, what if we do this? And they kind of said, well, okay, if you want to, let's give it a shot. And because it was a print script, a lot of the letters look like cursive writing, and some of them look like printing, depending on what the letter is and what it's about. So starting to teach it to kindergartners or first graders, we had a few parents who were going, whoa, my kid can barely, has terrible fine motor skills. Writing at all is really hard for him. Why are you trying to torture him with this stuff? But that same parent who said that, a year at the end of the school year, she said, I should have just trusted the process. He can do it, and it's helpful to him. So anyway, so that's what we did. And because I was very enthusiastic about it, and I had gone through a process to change my own handwriting, then I don't know, I guess it was just what happened.
So this is Vimla Handwriting, right? And,
yes.
And the system, basically, from what I'm just reiterating from what you've said, there's some sort of quality that each letter has that brings out a certain quality within yourself when you're writing it, or could you, is that correct?
Yes. So for instance, V is about discrimination, and not in the sense that you discriminate against people or whatever, but in the sense that you have a clear vision of what you're talking about. And it's the letter V, and you write the letter V so that it's, I'll write it on a piece of paper and hold it up.
Okay.
So, can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's always pointed at the bottom. It kind of, well, I didn't write it too well. It kind of comes off to the right in a arc-like thing, but it's always pointed at the bottom, and it's always a standalone letter. And an image that can be helpful in understanding this is like when you're trying to part your hair, if you just use your finger, you're going to get just something that's, kind of there. But if you use like a rat tail comb, which probably nobody even knows what that is anymore, but then you get a real clear line, and it's just, and that's kind of the way it is. Or if you were in a field with tall grain and you had if you just walk through it, you're knocking down stalks and it's kind of mushy, your trail. But if you go through with I think it's called a harrow, that's V-shaped as you're going down, it falls cleanly to the sides, and you can see exactly what you're doing. You have greater clarity about it. So that is one example of a letter.
Very interesting. And so this is a whole system of handwriting that teachers can learn and teach by just getting the book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they would. The main thing is with handwriting, if you're going to teach it, you have to do it yourself. Okay. And so when you're writing on the board or writing on, notes to students or whatever, if you're not using it, they're not going to use it. You just know how that is. And our the person who's been the primary teacher the last few years, and it's going to be our kindergarten teacher, Melissa Hart, she just totally took to this too. So it's just fun to go into her classroom and see on her board everything written out this way.
Wonderful.
Because it's a great example to the kids, and also just great for her.
Have you taught any workshops on this? Us? Yeah.
Oh yeah, not for quite a while, but I did initially for a number of years, and worked, we'd have auctions and stuff, and usually I'd offer a one-on-one or several of them if people wanted to bid on that, and then I'd work with them. Vimla suggests that you do like a 40-day cycle to change.
Wow, I feel like it would just be wonderful in the future if you could offer some sort of online Zoom Vimla handwriting classes for teachers. I just feel like that would be amazing.
Yeah, and then she has a workbook for teachers or homeschoolers. It was initially made for, but and one of my friends from those handwriting days, I went to a number of workshops with her as well, Susan Gavorko, has created a couple of books that have, each letter has associated with it, you know, a plant, a animal, many things, you know, a astrological sign and all that. So she made a coloring book for her grandchildren initially, but with the letter, each letter and its animal, and then like a sentence or something that they could trace or copy or whatever.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So there are some materials out there, but I created a number of things just because if the kids went through like the workbook, then 1 year, you know, then the next year, what are you going to do with them? So I created some things to have like the letters start larger and then get smaller, and have some things that if we were working with the letter, well, whatever it was, D or something, I'd have words that started with the letter D, had letter D in the middle, and some that ended with it. And I would try to pick words that had something to do with the quality. So anyway, it was fun for me to do that. And we made some cards to use with the intermediate students that had pictures of the animal on it and the letter, and then they could just go like a big deck of cards kind of, and they could go over and choose something for the day to practice that inspired them.
Do you have pictures of those cards that you made, or?
They're probably on the office computer. I mean, we just made them up on the computer and printed them out, you know, and laminated them. Yeah, we probably have them on the computer at school. And I have the worksheets that I initially made was a long time ago. So they were made using PageMaker, which probably doesn't even exist anymore. But some of them I saved at least as PDFs. So that, you know, people could utilize that if they wanted to.
Yeah, it would be great if after the interview, I mean, I was going to send you an email just asking for a few different resources that you could provide, even just links or things like that, of these different things you spoke about. But if, we could have some examples or images so teachers can just kind of see what, you know, what they could do, that would be great. Neat.
Yep, that would be a possibility.
That's great. Well, is there any other particular, I'm just scrolling through your questionnaire here. Is there any other particular, anything that you feel was sort of unique to your own personal teaching style, or anything that you did that you want to talk further about, or?
Well, one thing that I think is helpful for new teachers is to, at least it made my life a lot easier, was to have a structured routine from day to day. Because kids, at least in the age group that I mostly taught, which was first, second, third grade, thrive on a certain amount of structure. You know, you don't want to overstructure it, but you want them to know what to expect from day to day, from hour to hour, and so forth. Within that, you need to have variety, and you need to have choices for them to be able to make. Limited choices, though, because if you give most kids too many choices, they just dither, you know.
Yeah.
But giving them a couple of choices, or what I would often say to kids who, you know, loved to make their own choices, it's like, come up with an idea and then come talk to me about it. And if it seems feasible, great. But So one of the things that was so helpful to me was having thematic units. So we would have a particular theme, and I tried to include everything in all the curriculum areas for that period of time, maybe be 6 weeks or something. And there were just so many different things. We had so much fun with them. But what I would do, like I did an Arctic unit, which worked for me because I had taught school in Eskimo villages in Alaska. So I had things, for one thing, to show them and that they could feel, and wear my sealskin slippers or whatever.
Wow.
And, I was familiar with the food there and so forth. So it was not just a kind of academic. So often I see things like people teaching about Native cultures and you're just cringing going, oh man, for one thing, it's not accurate, but also it just seems, I don't know, weird. But anyway, so that was fun. But before I'd start any unit, I would first of all think, what is it that I want them to get from this? Appreciation of other cultures, do we need to really work on cooperation a lot? What is it? So I would meditate and I would just put that question out there, what, And so then I would try to, when I had some sense of what that was, and it could be based on their interests, my interests, what I thought the group needed. So all those things. And then I just would get a big piece of paper and colored markers and pencils and everything. And I would just create a curriculum map of, I'd write down things like, okay, what kind of songs are we going to sing? What games are we going to play? What factual information do I want them to know? What sorts of writing prompts are we going to have? What books will we read? What resources do I have, for one thing? But also, what can we come up with? How will math play into this? And everything. And I also would want to take into consideration flow learning, not only for a particular day's lesson, but for the whole unit. I wanted to start with awakening enthusiasm. It's like, we're going to start something new, woohoo, and we'd want to end with some kind of shared inspiration. Sometimes we would make these things. I'd seen a thing at an educational bookstore, for making what they called pocket books, where you'd take a 12 by 18 piece of construction paper and you'd fold it halfway up, so it would form a pocket and staple you'd make a book out of that, and maybe you'd have 4 or 5 pockets, and each pocket would have certain things in it. One time we did an ocean unit, and some of the pockets might be marine mammals. One might be plants, one might be whatever. So whatever you did that would fit in a pocket would go in there. So, and then at the end, we invited the kindergarten class over and shared our books with them and showed them the things we'd made, the writing we'd done. Kids read them their stories. And as much as I could, I would, with their help, decorate the classroom. So when we did an ocean unit, we had colored saran wrap, you can get it in blue and green and stuff. And I had a big, sheets and stuff all tacked to the ceiling, and then that covering it. And then we made crepe paper, not crepe paper. What's that stuff you do with glue and newspaper?
Oh, paper mache?
Yes, paper mache. We do it over a balloon, half a balloon. And then that would be our sea creature. I'm losing my vocabulary. I must be getting on. But anyway, jellyfish. And then we curl ribbon or crepe paper streamers or whatever to go on it, and had them all painted, and we'd hang those from the ceiling. So it's like we were living under the ocean, and we'd have kelp and so forth. And then maybe on the leaves of our kelp, if it was a kind that had leaves, we'd write certain things, like maybe things we noticed about each other in the classroom, that were helpful acts that people did or qualities that were especially helpful to the group as a whole. You know, if people were being kind or patient or whatever. And different writing projects, we'd always have them become part of the underwater world. And so it was really fun to bring over the kindergarten men and have them experience whatever we've been working on.
I can just see that. I can just see how, engaging that must have been for them. But you also mentioned, so I just want to sort of share back with you what you said. So basically in the beginning for each unit, you would kind of create a map and you would map out sort of the activities and different things you wanted to do for that particular unit and what activities you'd sort of cover. And then to get the kids interested in this new unit, you said you used flow learning. So what are the steps of flow learning?
Well, the first one is, and this is Joseph Cornell, of course, from his Sharing Nature books, but is Awaken Enthusiasm. And then the second one, I'm having trouble remembering, my words, but anyway, it's focusing attention. So if they're totally all enthusiastic and wild, you can't go to a real experience yet. You have to now get focused down, and then direct experience, whatever it is going to be, and then finally sharing enthusiasm.
Okay. So the sharing enthusiasm part was sharing with the kindergarten.
In that particular case, we did all kinds of things. We did a bear unit once, and we ended up having a teddy bear picnic at the park.
Oh, that's so fun.
And everybody hand wrote invitations to their particular bear to come, and da-da-da. So,
nice.
It'd always be different, but always be something. I mean, share inspiration, not share enthusiasm.
Okay, so you share it outside of your circle after you've...
It could be, or sometimes we'd ask parents if they could come a little early for pickup, and, they'd see their child's thing and so forth. So it might be just with each other, but always an opportunity to share the inspiration we'd gotten from whatever it was.
Nice. I love that. That just sounds like what you shared with the kids just must have been so like fun and exciting for them. At the same time, they're also learning about these things, about the Arctic or about Native people. And that's amazing. Love that.
It was a lot of fun. And, I'd always get to the end of a unit and then I go, oh gosh, I should have started with this instead, but fortunately I taught long enough that sometimes I could reuse parts of a unit at least. The thing is, the group of kids is always different. So something that you did once isn't going to necessarily work the same way another time, but at least you have already some materials gathered and some ideas in store. So
did you take any pictures of your classroom decorated like that, or?
Well, probably, but when we started the school, it was before digital.
Okay.
So, and through the years, I think we've gotten rid of a lot of pictures. I have a few things, but yeah, it's just so different nowadays. I think, whoa! But we had to buy the film and get the film processed, and then 2/3 of them would be terrible and so forth. But yeah, I have a few pictures from those days.
Nice. Yeah, it is very different now, isn't it? I mean,
it's funny. I would talk to the kids sometimes, and I'd say, now when I was your age, this didn't even exist. It's like, oh yeah, we had a telephone in our house, but 4 families used the same phone line. So you had to just pick up and listen, make sure it wasn't in use, and hang up quietly if someone else was on. It wasn't okay to listen.
Amazing how fast things have changed. I mean, it's just really amazing.
Well, I just look now too at kids I've taught through the years and how old everybody is. Before we started the school and I was teaching in Alaska, I taught high school for a couple of years. So of course those kids are now in their late 30s or 40s, and their kids are all as old as they were when I was teaching there and stuff. So
yeah,
but
it
it's
must,
pretty fun to see.
I'm sure, like for example, like you mentioned Claire Potter, it just must be so interesting just to know her now as a complete adult. And um,
Yeah, a lot has changed since she was 5 years old, you know.
yeah.
Antonia, you know, is like, okay.
Do you keep in touch with some of the families, the Gormans, for example?
Oh,
Or,
yes.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, for one thing, Helen has been teaching at the school all these years. She just retired at the end of this school year. So she's been teaching kindergarten for all those years.
So will the physical school be opening up this fall, or what's the plan?
What the plan is at this moment in time, which is all we can talk about,
Yeah.
because we're such a small school and we have small classes, we fall under the same as a daycare designation. So as long as we have 10 or fewer students per room, and it has to be, we have to have like 35 square feet per student or whatever. And we don't develop a bunch of cases of, you know, positive COVID, then we can be in person.
Okay. So is that
So that's the plan at the moment.
okay? So US schools are really, I mean, I shouldn't say US, California or wherever you're located there, or sorry, Oregon, they're saying that kids can go back to school in the fall?
Well, no, actually, most of the public schools, because they can't fit those, they have to meet a lot stricter standards. And actually, right now, Portland, Beaverton, and several other districts have said that they'll do remote only until at least November.
Oh, wow.
So the first couple months of school are going to be remote again. We felt like that, especially with preschool and kindergarten, with children that you don't already know. I mean, it kind of worked last year because the teachers and students had been together for the biggest part of the year. So meeting, like Melissa was meeting with her kids an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon online. And because they all knew each other well, that worked for most kids. Not everybody. Some kids, it was just like, that's it. But, and then she'd meet with them one-on-one on Zoom or whatever, at least once a week. But to try to develop that with kids that you don't have a connection with already, we just felt like that probably group wouldn't. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
It's like, preschool, what are you going to do online? You know, hello, come back.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, I think screens for them at that age is just not that interesting. I mean,
yeah, it really seemed pretty pointless, but basically they just kept a little connection going. I think for the preschool, I don't know what they did, maybe a story or something, you know, or some kind of circle thing, but yeah, so we'll see what happens. You know, you just don't know from day to day what's happening. Oregon is not as bad off as, say, California.
Okay.
However, we're still having quite a few new cases every day, and more than we'd like to see. It's been on an increase, but it's leveled up, but it's still higher than we want, that sort of thing. And I think 6% positivity rate on testing and stuff, which is more than
and I think it's like seven or 8 students or something. So yeah,
that should be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Do you know what you're going to do yet?
Yeah, I had a couple exercises. I don't know, lately with art, I'm just really going back to the basics. Like the opening exercise, I wanted them to explore with modeling clay, just to have something tactile and just to be able to have something in their hand and just be very like grounded in their bodies, and you know, maybe just creating some little shapes or little people. Or I was actually thinking of doing asking everyone to create a little garden, however they want the garden to be. So maybe little flowers or trees, or they could do a picket fence, or anything they want, and then moving into a painting exercise where I was just going to start with mixing colors, and then once we have all the colors, then taking a color and saying, what's the first thing that you think of when you see red, or what's the first thing you think of when you see blue, and then painting that thing. I thought it would just be a fun sort of free flow kind of thing, you know, not too much structure, but just enough to keep them motivated. So yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see what they come up with, because I can see already some of them, it's just like a blob of color, basically, because that's what they're attracted to. And for others, it'll be, maybe they'll have that too to start with, but then they'll just add all this detail to it. And
exactly.
Some of them will probably think, oh, what could I use with my garden? And, you know, it's going to be all over the place. It'll be so fun.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I remember loving teachers who would give us that freedom to just kind of really explore, but you have some boundaries, but they're very loose. Like Dana, for example, I mean, she's a great example of that. She just gives you unlimited room to use your own creativity. And I really I thrive in that. So I always feel like I try to bring that when I'm working with kids that way too. So
yeah. I've done, she had a series going for a while recently, and I did that 5 Saturdays.
Oh, nice.
And it was just fun, but it was interesting. It took me a couple weeks to kind of relax about it all and quit trying to make something, you know, you know, to just let it flow and then look at it and see, what have you got there? Maybe something, maybe nothing. But what I often found was something that I thought was just a smear of something. Later, when we came back, that would be the thing that stood out for me, that I would want to embody, you know, and to see what is that. One time I was going to take my little palette that I had my colors mixed into the sink, but it was pretty wet, so I didn't want to drip it on the floor. So I took a paper towel and just started blotting it. And I ended up doing my thing with the paper towel. You know, you're just going, oh, look, here it all is.
Wow. I love
so
that.
Fun.
That's so great. I wanted to join that class, but it was it would have been like at midnight my time here or something. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's great. You got to join that. Yeah. Nice. Oh, well, it's been so great catching up with you and just hearing your stories. I just feel so inspired by everything that we talked about today. And I mean, it's so inspiring speaking to EFL teachers. I'm just re-inspired every time. So it's really
So what's going to become of the interviews with the information that you're gathering, or the whatever?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to it. Basically, one part is we have an editor. You might know him, Rambakta. And he takes the interviews. Well, first step is one of the teachers reviews this interview, usually Irene or Nitai. And then we mark the sections. Like, for example, we're going to cut a section from this interview and call it Vimla Handwriting for Teachers, or and we'll cut it into little segments. And then once those little segments are titled, we cut the videos and then we put them on the EFL YouTube channel so people can view them. And
is there already an EFL YouTube channel?
There is, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I'm totally unaware of it.
But it's going to be...
I'm unaware of a lot of things, but...
Yeah, it's going to be building over the next few months for sure because of all these interviews that we've been doing. And then these interview clips will also be available on that new Notion database that Aryavan has been creating.
Yes.
And so the goal is, after each teacher interview, I've been asking the teachers to provide some resources, like things that they've built up over their years of teaching, activities, or tools of working with the kids. A lot of people are providing images or links to, you know, tools that they use or they love. And I made a couple notes of resources that I'll email you about after that perhaps you could provide. And then if there's anything else, like you have unlimited space basically on this Notion site to just download any materials or images that you'd like to share for teachers to have as a resource. And if you don't feel comfortable going onto this Notion software, which a lot of people don't, you're welcome to just email any resources to me and I'll just upload them when I get the opportunity, or pass them to Aryavan to upload them. And so it's all in time. There's no rush. Like, you can take your time. If you find something down the road too, you can just send it to us or to me, and we'll just have it up there. So that's basically, the database is all depending on you as teachers to provide resources. So we're kind of asking the EFL teachers to just provide whatever they can. And then of course we have these interview segments too as a resource. So yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Bharati. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
My pleasure. It was really a joy to spend time with you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So hopefully we'll talk to you again soon, and I'll be sending you an email after this. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
All righty.
God bless.
Good morning. Good night for me. Good morning.
Yeah,
for you.
good evening for you.